Sydney in the late 18th century was nothing more than a dream in British colonial plans, a remote harbour on the far edge of the known world, about to become one of history's most unlikely great cities. And in this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. We're about to watch a penal colony transform into a global metropolis across 250 years of dramatic change. Subscribe to see more cities brought back to life and drop a comment suggesting which city you want to see next. First, I want to talk about the moment it all began. This view shows Captain Cook's landing at Botany Bay in April 1770, and the British Empire is planting its flag on Australian soil for the first time. Endeavour sits anchored offshore, her sails furled after months at sea, while sailors row toward the beach in smaller boats. The Gadigal people stand on the shore watching these strangers arrive, their world about to change forever. Cook names this place after the botanist Joseph Banks, who will catalogue hundreds of plant species unknown to European science. The air smells of salt and eucalyptus. Smoke rises from Aboriginal campfires in the background, communities that have lived here for tens of thousands of years. Cook's crew spends a week exploring and mapping the area, collecting specimens and taking notes. Within 18 years, Britain will return, not with explorers, but with convicts in chains, 11 ships carrying over 1,000 souls to establish a permanent settlement. This peaceful landing is the beginning of colonisation, the first step in a transformation neither the British nor the Aboriginal people could fully imagine. Today, Botany Bay remains a protected area where visitors can stand on the same shores Cook first explored, markers and monuments commemorating that fateful encounter. This view shows Sydney Cove in 1794, and the settlement clings to the harbour's edge like a fragile experiment that might fail at any moment. Artist Thomas Watling captures the scene from across the water, rough timber buildings with bark roofs, cleared patches of land carved from dense bushland, and smoke drifting from brick chimneys. Convicts swing axes and haul timber under the watch of uniformed guards, building the infrastructure of their own prison. The colony is barely 6 years old and struggling with starvation that has brought it to the brink of collapse. Ships in the harbour represent the only connection to civilization, taking 8 months to reach England if the winds are favourable. The smell of wood smoke mixes with the scent of unfamiliar bushland and the salt air from the harbour. At night, the sounds of the Australian wilderness surround the tiny settlement. Strange birds calling, possums rustling in the trees, creatures the British have never heard before. Food shortages threaten survival almost constantly. Convicts and guards alike go hungry when supply ships are delayed. But Sydney is holding on, determined to survive against all odds. Governor Arthur Phillip has kept the colony alive through sheer willpower and strict rationing. Remarkably, parts of the original street plan from this era still define the Rocks neighbourhood today, the oldest surviving area of European Sydney. This view shows the settlement in 1808, and Sydney Cove is maturing into something more permanent and structured. Red roof buildings replace the desperate bark-covered shelters of earlier years. The settlement pushes inland from the water, clearing more land with each passing month, expanding beyond the original cove. Convict labour continues building roads, bridges, warehouses and government structures. Free settlers are beginning to arrive, seeing opportunity in this distant corner of the empire, bringing capital and ambition. The population has grown to nearly 5,000 people, a mix of convicts serving their sentences, emancipated convicts who've earned their freedom, and free colonists seeking their fortunes. The harbour remains the centre of everything. Every person, every tool, every piece of news, every ounce of food still arrives by ship. The sound of hammers and saws fills the air from dawn to dusk as construction never stops. At the waterfront, sailors unload cargo while merchants haggle over prices for imported goods that command premium rates in this isolated market. The colony is becoming self-sufficient in basic foods, with farms spreading across the Cumberland Plain. Sydney is no longer just a prison camp clinging to survival, it's becoming a real town with commerce, trade, property ownership, and ambitions beyond mere survival. This view shows the Supreme Court and St James's Church in 1842. By the 1840s, Sydney is building the institutions of a proper colonial capital, establishing the legal and religious framework of British society. The Supreme Court of New South Wales, established in 1823, administers British justice to a population that now includes more free citizens than convicts. A remarkable transformation. Beside it, St James's Church rises with its distinctive Georgian spire, designed by convict architect Francis Greenway and serving Anglican worshippers every Sunday. Horse-drawn carriages roll past on unpaved roads that turn to mud when it rains. Wooden fences mark property boundaries along streets that are becoming more organised. Well-dressed gentlemen in top hats and tailcoats conduct business on the streets, while women in long dresses and bonnets shop at market stalls selling vegetables, meat and imported fabrics. The smell of horse manure mixes with coal smoke from chimneys and the ever-present dust that rises from the unpaved streets. Sydney is 54 years old, and the rough edges are disappearing rapidly. The convict stain is starting to fade as the city builds churches, courts, schools and hospitals. Respectable society is emerging, eager to distance itself from the penal origins. These same buildings still stand today, preserved as heritage sites in the modern city centre, reminders of Sydney's transformation from prison to proper city. This view shows George Street in 1858, and the city is looking almost refined and prosperous. George Street runs through Sydney's heart with 3-storey buildings lining the wide boulevard, their facades housing shops selling imported goods, law offices, banks and residences above street level. The gold rushes in Victoria and New South Wales are flooding Sydney with money, new construction everywhere, streets being paved, thousands of fortune seekers passing through the port on their way to the goldfields or returning with their finds. Pedestrians crowd the wooden sidewalks in Victorian clothing, men in waistcoats and bowler hats, women in crinolines and parasols. Horse-drawn carts haul merchandise through the street, while private carriages carry the wealthy. The street smells of fresh bread from bakeries, leather from saddlers' shops, tobacco smoke, and dust kicked up by constant traffic. Street vendors call out their wares, fresh fish, vegetables, newspapers. Transportation of convicts to New South Wales will end in just 4 years in 1862, closing that chapter of Sydney's history forever. Sydney is reinventing itself as a free city, eager to forget its prison origins and compete with Melbourne for status as Australia's premier city. The gold wealth is transforming Sydney's architecture and ambitions. The route of George Street remains Sydney's main thoroughfare even now, though the buildings have changed completely, replaced by modern skyscrapers and commercial towers. This view shows the Garden Palace in 1880, and it's the most ambitious structure Sydney has ever attempted or imagined. The Garden Palace rises in the domain with elaborate domes and towers reaching skyward, a cathedral of glass and iron. Built for the 1879 International Exhibition, this massive building covers 28 acres, the largest structure in the Southern Hemisphere at the time. Thousands of visitors in Victorian dress stroll the manicured grounds, viewing exhibits from across the British Empire and beyond, machinery, art, natural resources, manufactured goods from dozens of countries. The palace demonstrates Sydney's confidence and wealth. We can match Melbourne's 1880 exhibition. We can rival the great exhibitions of London and Paris. The building cost over $190,000 to construct, a staggering sum that sparked political controversy. Inside, the light filters through glass panels, illuminating displays of art, machinery, colonial products, and natural history specimens. The exhibition draws over 1 million visitors during its run. But the Garden Palace will burn to the ground in a catastrophic fire on September 22, 1882, destroying countless artifacts, artworks, and scientific specimens in just a few hours. The fire starts in the early morning and spreads too quickly to stop. Today, only historical markers and photographs in the domain indicate where this lost wonder once stood, a reminder that Sydney's grandest buildings don't always survive. This view shows George Street in 1888, and Alfred Tischbauer captures Sydney at its Victorian height, the golden age of colonial prosperity. Grand buildings with ornate stonework and detailed facades line both sides of the street, competing for attention with decorated columns, arched windows, and elaborate cornices. Crowds pack the sidewalks, shoppers browsing store windows, businessmen heading to offices, workers heading home, street vendors selling flowers and newspapers. Horse-drawn vehicles navigate between pedestrians while stray dogs wander freely through the crowds. Gas lamps line the street, ready to light the thoroughfare after dark, though electric lighting is coming soon to replace them. The air fills with the sounds of commerce and urban life, vendors calling out, wheels clattering on cobblestones, conversations in multiple accents as immigrants from Britain, Ireland, China and across Europe mix together. Sydney's population has exploded past 220,000, making it one of the largest cities in the British Empire outside Britain itself, rivaling major European cities in size. The wealth from wool exports, Australia's golden fleece, is visible in every grand building, every fashionable shop, every new construction project. Sydney is booming, growing faster than almost any city on earth. This same stretch of George Street remains the commercial heart of Sydney today, though now it's closed to private vehicles and serves as a pedestrian transit corridor. This view shows Sydney from above in 1888, and the city spreads around the harbour like a living organism consuming the landscape in every direction. The grid pattern extends inland from Sydney Cove, while suburbs reach north across the water and south toward Botany Bay, where it all began. The harbour is crowded with vessels, tall sailing ships, coal-burning steamers, ferries shuttling between wharves, creating a forest of masts and funnels that blocks the view of the water. Railways now connect Sydney to the interior, bringing wool, wheat, coal and people to the coast, making Sydney the transportation hub of New South Wales. From this height, the red-roofed city clusters densely around the harbour's edge, then thins out into suburbs and farmland. Sydney Town Hall's tower rises as the tallest structure, dominating the skyline in an era before skyscrapers. Church spires punctuate the urban landscape, Anglican, Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, serving different communities. The suburbs are pushing outward relentlessly, swallowing farmland and bushland, creating new neighbourhoods that didn't exist a decade earlier. In just over a century, this has grown from a desperate convict camp to a city of nearly 400,000 people, one of the great urban success stories of the British Empire. Modern Sydney's footprint follows these same patterns established in the Victorian era, spreading even further around the harbour and inland. This view shows the harbour bridge under construction in 1930, and the two halves are about to meet in one of engineering's most dramatic moments. The Sydney Harbour Bridge is rising, with the massive steel arch nearly spanning the water from shore to shore, the gap narrowing day by day. Construction began in 1923, and workers in caps and overalls labour on the steel framework hundreds of feet above the water, their tiny figures visible against the massive structure. Ferries still crowd the wharves at McMahon's Point, carrying passengers across as they have for decades, their routes about to become obsolete. The bridge will open in March 1932, transforming Sydney forever by connecting the northern suburbs and ending the isolation caused by the harbour that has divided the city since the beginning. The cost has reached $6.25 million, more than double the original estimate, sparking fierce political debates. When completed, it will be the world's widest long-span bridge, a record it will hold for decades. 16 workers will die during construction, their names recorded on a plaque. The bridge becomes Sydney's defining landmark almost immediately, more iconic than any building, appearing on postcards and photographs around the world. Today, visitors can climb its arch for panoramic views across the entire city, seeing Sydney from the perspective of those original construction workers. This view shows the Opera House in 1966, and its revolutionary design is causing controversy and wonder across the city. The Sydney Opera House rises on Bennelong Point with distinctive white shell-shaped roofs unlike anything ever built before, pushing the boundaries of architecture and engineering. Danish architect Junian Utzon won the design competition in 1957 with a concept so innovative that no one knew how to actually build it, construction has become a nightmare of technical challenges, delays, and budget overruns that dominate newspaper headlines. Those shells are requiring engineering solutions that don't yet exist, problems solved through computer modeling and innovative construction techniques. The harbour bridge arches in the background, watching this bold experiment take shape, the old icon observing the new. Utzon will resign in February 1966 after bitter disputes with the government over design changes and budget pressures, never seeing his masterpiece finished. A tragedy of artistic vision clashing with political reality. The Opera House will finally open in October 1973, 14 years after construction began, costing $102 million instead of the projected $7 million. It immediately becomes the symbol of modern Sydney and one of the most recognisable buildings on Earth, appearing in films, photographs, and the imagination of millions. Today it remains Sydney's most visited attraction, hosting over 500 performances annually. Sydney explodes across the final decades of the 20th century and into the 21st, transforming beyond recognition. The Opera House opens in 1973, instantly defining the city's image worldwide and appearing on every tourist brochure. Skyscrapers transform the skyline as Sydney becomes a major Asia-Pacific financial centre, competing with Hong Kong, Singapore and Tokyo. Immigration from Europe, Asia, the Middle East and the Pacific makes Sydney one of the world's most multicultural cities, with over 250 languages spoken and entire suburbs defined by different immigrant communities. The 2000 Summer Olympics showcases Sydney to billions of viewers, cementing its status as a global city that can host the world's biggest events. Darling Harbour gets completely redeveloped from abandoned docks into entertainment, shopping and convention precincts. The suburbs sprawl endlessly westward into the Blue Mountains foothills and south toward Wollongong. By 2025, Greater Sydney is home to over 5 million people, a far cry from that desperate convict settlement clinging to Sydney Cove in 1788, barely surviving on the edge of the known world. When you move through these reconstructed scenes, the past doesn't feel distant, it feels remarkably close, separated by just a few generations. The same harbour that challenged those first convicts still defines Sydney today, still shapes how the city grows and functions. The same light that inspired 19th century artists still draws people to the waterfront every evening to watch the sun set over the water. History isn't something locked away in books and museums, it's layered beneath every street, embedded in every building that survived, visible in the bones of the city itself. If there's another city, another moment in time, or another historical scene you'd like to see brought to life with AI reconstruction, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what fascinates you about the past. Again, thank you so much.